Captain Veltar stared at the massive object floating in space. The alien warship was bigger than anything his people had ever built. Its dark metal hull was covered in scars and holes from old battles. Strange symbols were painted on its sides, in faded white paint. "Sir, the ship appears to be human," said his science officer, Crixon. The tall blue alien tapped his console with 6 thin fingers. "But the readings don't make sense." Veltar's 4 eyes narrowed. Humans were new to space travel. They had only learned to fly between stars about 100 years ago. Most galactic races treated them like curious children who had just learned to walk. Their technology was supposed to be simple and crude. "What kind of readings?" Veltar asked. Crixon's head tentacles twitched nervously. "The hull material is unlike anything in our databases. The energy signatures suggest power systems that shouldn't be possible. And sir, the ship is still generating power after floating, here for decades." The Zephyrian captain walked closer to the viewing screen. His people had been exploring space for over 3,000 years. They had seen technology from hundreds of different races. Nothing should surprise him anymore. "Scan it again," he ordered. "I've scanned it 12 times, sir. The results are always the same. This ship contains technology that violates several laws of physics." Veltar made a clicking sound with his throat. It was the Zephyrian equivalent of a human laugh, but without any humor. "Impossible. Humans barely understand quantum mechanics. Last month, one of their ships asked us for directions to their own home system. Yes, sir, but this ship is different." The captain studied the derelict vessel on his screen. It was called the UES Indomitable according to the faded letters on its hull. The design looked both ancient and advanced at the same time. Smooth curves mixed with sharp angles. Weapon ports that seemed too large for any normal projectile. Armor plating that appeared to have grown rather than been built. "How long has it been here?" Veltar asked. "Based on cosmic radiation levels, approximately 53 years. It was abandoned near the end of the human-Kralix War." Veltar remembered that war. The Kralix had tried to wipe out humanity before they could become a threat. Most galactic races had expected the humans to surrender within months. Instead, the war had lasted 20 years and ended with the Kralix retreating to their home system, beaten and broken. "Prepare a boarding party," Veltar decided. "I want to know what made this ship so special." 2 hours later, the Zephyrian boarding team cut through the airlock of the human ship. Emergency lighting still glowed in the corridors, casting long shadows on the walls. The air was stale but breathable. Gravity systems were still working. Crixon led the team deeper into the ship. The corridors were wider than necessary, designed for beings much larger than humans. The walls were lined with metal plaques, each one containing human writing and numbers. "These appear to be memorial markers," Crixon said, running a scanner over one of the plaques. "Names, dates, and locations, thousands of them." "Memorial markers on a warship?" Veltar frowned. "That's unusual." They continued forward until they reached the bridge. The command center was enormous, filled with control stations that mixed primitive manual controls with advanced holographic displays. In the center sat a captain's chair surrounded by screens that still showed star charts and tactical information. "Look at this," called Tholix, the team's engineer. He was examining a weapons control panel. "These targeting systems are more advanced than anything we have, but they're connected to manual firing controls that look like they belong in a museum." Crixon approached the main computer terminal. "The ship's memory banks are still active. I should be able to access their logs and find out what happened here." "Do it," Veltar ordered. The science officer connected his portable interface to the human system. Immediately, warning lights began flashing throughout the bridge. A voice spoke in perfect Zephyrian, though no human should have known their language. "Unknown beings detected on bridge. Identity verification required." The Zephyrian team looked at each other in shock. The ship's computer had been waiting for them. It had learned their language just from their brief scan. "I am Captain Veltar, of the Zephyrian science vessel Theoretical Convergence. This ship appears to be abandoned. We are conducting a salvage operation under galactic law." "Salvage operation acknowledged," the voice replied. "However, this vessel is not abandoned. Crew status, suspended animation, mission status, Ongoing. Authorization level insufficient for full access. Veltar's tentacles went stiff with surprise. There are still crew members aboard? Affirmative. 47 crew members in medical stasis. Ship's captain available for revival upon request. The aliens stood in stunned silence. The ship had been floating in space for over 50 years, but it still had a living crew. More disturbing was how easily the computer spoke their language and understood their intentions. "How is the computer so advanced?" Tholu whispered to Crixon. "It's responding to our thoughts as much as our words." Crixon ran deeper scans on the computer core. What he found made his skin change color from blue to pale green. "Sir, this isn't a normal computer. The processing matrix contains organic tissue, living brain matter integrated with quantum processors." "That's impossible," Veltar said. "No race has ever successfully merged biological and artificial intelligence. The humans have," Crixon replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And, sir, the brain tissue isn't human. The genetic markers suggest multiple species, dozens of different races all integrated into a single consciousness." Veltar stared at the innocent-looking computer terminal. What kind of beings would put living minds into their war machines? What kind of technology could keep multiple alien brains alive and thinking for decades in the cold of space? "Sir," Tholix called from across the bridge, "you need to see this weapon system analysis." Tiwi, Captain walked over to the engineer station. The screen showed a detailed breakdown of the ship's armaments. What he saw made his four stomachs turn cold. "These aren't normal weapons," Tholu explained. "The projectiles appear to be programmable matter. They can change their molecular structure during flight. Armor piercing against shields. Explosive against hulls. Electromagnetic pulse against electronics. One weapon that becomes whatever is needed." "And the power system?" Veltar asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "I can't understand it, sir. The reactor appears to be generating energy by creating small tears in space-time. They're literally stealing power from parallel dimensions." Veltar looked around the bridge of the human ship. Everything he saw challenged what he thought he knew about the universe. Weapons that changed themselves, computers made from living minds, power systems that bent reality. "How long have humans possessed this technology?" he asked. "According to the ship's construction records, it was built 87 years ago," Crixon replied. "But sir, that's impossible. Humans had barely invented fusion power at that time." The captain sat heavily in the nearest chair. His people had been wrong about humanity. Completely and utterly wrong. These weren't primitive newcomers to space, they were something far more dangerous. "Should we wake the captain?" Crixon asked. Veltar looked at the computer terminal, knowing that somewhere in its organic matrix, dozens of alien minds were watching him, waiting to see what he would do. "Yes," he said finally. "Wake her up. I think it's time we learned what humans really are." Tholix had been an engineer for 40 years. He had studied the technology of every known race in the galaxy. He understood quantum mechanics, dimensional physics, and temporal engineering, but the human ship made him feel like a child trying to understand magic. 3 days had passed since they boarded the Indomitable. Each hour brought new discoveries that shouldn't exist. The ship's armor was the first mystery that broke his understanding of materials science. "Look at this," he said to Crixon, pointing at a section of the hull that had been damaged in some ancient battle. "The metal isn't just repaired. It's stronger than it was before." The science officer ran his scanner over the area. "The molecular structure has changed. The damage caused the metal to reorganize itself into a more resilient pattern." "That's not possible," Tholu muttered, but he was getting tired of saying those words. Metal doesn't learn from being hit. It doesn't get smarter. But the human armor had done exactly that. Every blast mark, every puncture, every scratch had been incorporated into the hull's design. The ship had been hurt in battle, but instead of becoming weaker, it had become stronger. Like a bone that grows denser after being broken. They moved deeper into the ship's weapon systems. The missile launchers looked simple from the outside, but inside they were marvels of adaptive technology. Tholix opened one of the projectiles and nearly dropped his tools in shock. Crixhan, record this, he said, his voice shaking. The missile contains programmable matter held in quantum suspension, but that's not the impossible part. What's the impossible part? The science officer asked, though he looked like he didn't want to know. It's making decisions. Right now, while I'm holding it, the missile is analyzing my scanner readings and adapting its configuration. It's learning what kind of target I might be and preparing to counter my species' typical defenses. Crixhan's tentacles went rigid with fear. You're saying the weapon is thinking? No, Tholix replied slowly. I'm saying it's dreaming. It's imagining different ways to kill me and choosing the most effective method. They carefully put the missile back and moved to the ship's power core. What they found there made them question everything they thought they knew about physics. The reactor room was filled with a soft blue light that seemed to come from empty space itself. The energy readings are off all our charts, Crixhan said, but I can't find the source of the power. Tholix studied the reactor design. It looked like a sphere of twisted metal floating in the center of the room, surrounded by devices that hurt his brain to look at. According to these controls, they call it a paradox engine. What does it do? Based on these equations, it creates temporal loops in spacetime. The engine uses energy from the future to power itself in the present, then sends that same energy back in time to complete the loop. Crixhan stared at him. That would create a causality violation. Yes. The humans built a power system that violates cause and effect, and somehow it works. But the strangest discovery was in the ship's computer core. They had expected to find quantum processors or crystalline storage matrices. Instead, they found something that looked like a medical laboratory merged with a morgue. The computer's brain was kept in a clear tank filled with glowing fluid. But it wasn't one brain. It was dozens of them, all connected by fiber optic cables that pulsed with data. The brains belonged to different species, some human, some Kralix, some from races Tholu didn't recognize. How are they still alive? He whispered. They're not alive, Crixhan corrected, but they're not dead either. The human technology has preserved their consciousness after biological death. These brains are still thinking, still dreaming, still making decisions for the ship. A voice spoke from hidden speakers, making them both jump. It was different from the ship's normal computer voice. This one was layered, as if multiple beings were speaking in harmony. We volunteered, the voices said. When our bodies died, we chose to remain with the ship, to serve humanity even after death. You're ghosts, Tholu breathed. We are memory made manifest, experience given form. We are the wisdom of the dead serving the needs of the living. The engineer backed away from the tank. Why would anyone agree to such a thing? Because humans do not abandon their own. Not in life, not in death, not in the empty spaces between stars. We are crew members, and our duty does not end when our hearts stop beating. Crixhan was scanning the surrounding machinery. The entire ship is integrated with this consciousness. The weapons, the engines, the life support systems, everything is controlled by the preserved minds of dead crew members. Dead crew members from multiple species, Tholix added, studying the genetic markers. Humans, Kralix, Zephyrians, Vorthon, even some races I don't recognize. The ship collects us, the voices explained. In battle, when enemy crew members die with honor, we invite them to join us, to continue serving, but in a new form. Many accept. Death is not the end for those who choose to remain. The two aliens looked at each other in horror. The humans hadn't just built a warship. They had built a flying cemetery that recruited the dead from both sides of every battle. A vessel powered by ghosts and crewed by volunteers who had chosen consciousness over oblivion. How many battles has this ship fought? Crixhan asked. 47 major engagements, 312 minor actions. We have been destroyed completely 7 times and rebuilt ourselves from scattered atoms. And determined memory, destroyed 7 times? Tholu couldn't hide his shock. How are you still here? Because destruction is not defeat. As long as one consciousness remains, as long as one memory endures, the ship can be rebuilt. We are not just a vessel. We are an idea made real. The idea that nothing truly dies if someone remembers it with love. The engineer walked over to a viewing port and looked out at the stars. Everything made sense now. The armor that learned from damage. The weapons that adapted to any threat. The power system that ignored the laws of physics. The computer made from the willing dead. "You're not just a warship," he said quietly. "You're a monument, a memorial that fights. We are memory with purpose, love armed with weapons, hope that refuses to surrender to the dark." Crixhan was still scanning the computer system. "Sir, I'm detecting massive data storage arrays throughout the ship. Not just tactical information, but cultural data. Music, art, literature, personal messages, family records. We carry more than weapons," the voices confirmed. "We are a library ship, an archive ship, a culture ship. If humanity dies, we will carry their civilization to the stars. If they live, we will return their treasures to them. Either way, something survives." Tholik realized they had stumbled onto something far more significant than advanced technology. They had found a species that had weaponized their own mortality, turned death itself into a tool of war and preservation. "The other races need to know about this," he said. "Yes," the voices agreed. "They should know that humans do not fight to win. We fight to ensure that something good survives. We fight so that love continues even if we do not." The Zephyrian engineer looked around the computer core one more time. Dozens of preserved brains from multiple species, all united in purpose, all serving something greater than themselves. "What are you really?" he asked. "We are what remains when flesh fails but purpose endures. We are the answer to the question, what happens when a species refuses to let death have the final word?" Crixhan walked slowly through the crew quarters of the Indomitable. Each room told a story that made his heart ache. These weren't the quarters of professional soldiers or career warriors. These were the rooms of ordinary people who had been forced to become heroes. The first room belonged to someone named Maria Santos. Her personal items were still arranged on the small desk. A photo of two children smiling at the camera, a hand-drawn picture that said, "Come home safe, Mommy," in crayon, and a wedding ring on a simple chain. The ring was worn smooth from being touched countless times. "She was an engineer," Crixhan said to Tholux, reading the duty roster on the wall. "Before the war, she designed water purification systems for colony worlds." "What made her join? A warship?" Tholux asked. Crixhan found her service record in the ship's computer. The Kralix attacked her home colony. Her husband and children were killed in the first bombardment. She volunteered the next day. They moved to the next room. This one belonged to David Chen, a teacher from Earth. His quarters contained books, actual paper books, not digital files. The titles were in a dozen human languages: poetry, history, children's stories, technical manuals. On his bed was a stuffed animal, a small brown bear with one missing eye. Why would a teacher bring toys to war? Tholux wondered. The ship's computer answered their unspoken question. David Chen taught primary school before enlisting. He brought the bear because it belonged to one of his students who died in the Kralix attack on Luna Station. He said the child would want to see the stars. Room after room revealed the same pattern. These weren't soldiers. They were farmers, doctors, artists, mechanics, parents, and grandparents. People who had been living normal lives until war came to their worlds and took everything they loved. But it was the ship's medical bay that truly broke their understanding of human warfare. The facility was larger than many planetary hospitals, filled with equipment that could perform miracles. Surgical robots that could rebuild a body from scattered molecules. Genetic repair systems that could cure any disease. Life support technology that could keep someone alive even if their heart and lungs stopped working. "This medical bay is more advanced than our best research hospitals," Tholu said in amazement. "They could probably bring the dead back to life." "They do," said the ship's collective voice. "Death in battle is not permanent for human crew members. As long as enough organic material remains, we can rebuild them." Along the walls of the medical bay were rows of stasis pods, each one containing a perfectly preserved human. Men and women of different ages, all sleeping peacefully with small smiles on their faces. How long have they been in there? Crixhan asked. Some for 50 years. Others were placed in stasis yesterday from your perspective. Time moves differently for us. We can keep them safe until they are needed again. One of the pods began to activate without warning. Lights flickered on, and the preservation fluid started to drain. The human inside was a woman with short gray hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of many years making difficult decisions. Why is she waking up? Tholix asked nervously. Because she is needed. Captain Sarah Chen is the commanding officer of this vessel. She should speak for her crew. The pod opened with a soft hiss. The woman inside took a deep breath and sat up slowly. Her eyes were clear and alert, showing no confusion or disorientation. She looked at the two aliens standing beside her pod and nodded politely. Good morning, she said in perfect Zephyrian. I'm Captain Sarah Chen. I assume you're the beings who boarded my ship. Crixhan was too shocked to speak. The human had been in stasis for decades, but she acted like she had just taken a short nap. More disturbing was how she spoke their language fluently, even though no human should know Zephyrian. How do you know our language? Tholix managed to ask. The ship taught me while I was sleeping. It's been monitoring your conversations and updating my knowledge. I know you're from the science vessel Theoretical Convergence, that you're conducting a salvage operation, and that you're very confused about our technology. Captain Chen stood up and began putting on the uniform that was waiting beside her pod. Her movements were calm and efficient, like someone who had done this many times before. How long have I been out? She asked the ship's computer. 53 years, 4 months, 17 days, Captain. Status report on the crew? 46 crew members remain in stasis. All systems are functioning normally. Mission parameters unchanged. Good. And our guests? They appear to be peaceful researchers. No hostile intentions detected. Captain Chen turned to the two aliens and smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and welcoming. But there was something behind her eyes that made them both step backward. She looked like someone who had seen terrible things and made terrible choices, but had found peace with both. I apologize for the dramatic awakening, she said. But when strangers board my ship, I prefer to greet them personally. It's only polite. Your ship has been drifting for over 50 years, Crixhan said. The war is over. Why are you still here? Because our mission isn't finished, Captain Chen replied simply. We weren't just fighting to win battles. We were fighting to preserve something precious. As long as that something needs protection, we remain on duty. She walked over to one of the viewing ports and looked out at the stars. Tell me, what has happened to humanity since the war ended? They've become a minor trading partner with the galactic community, Tholix answered. Mostly they keep to themselves in their own sector of space. And the colonies that were attacked? Rebuilt mostly. Some were abandoned. Captain Chen nodded, sadly. Then our work continues. This ship carries the complete cultural archives of 17 human colonies that were destroyed in the war. Art, music, literature, personal records, genetic databases, everything that made those places home. We're not just a warship, we're a seed bank for dead worlds. Why not return to human space and deliver the archives? Crixhan asked. Because the war taught us that nowhere is truly safe. As long as we keep moving, keep watching, keep ready, the archives survive. If we settle somewhere, they become a target again. The captain walked over to her stasis pod and picked up a small device from a shelf. It looked like a simple music player, but when she activated it, the medical bay filled with the sound of children singing. The song was in a human language. The aliens didn't recognize, but the melody was beautiful and sad. This is the children's choir from New Geneva Colony, Captain Chen explained. 3,000 children died when the Krelligs poisoned the atmosphere. This recording is all that remains of their voices. We carry it with us, so they can still sing among the stars. How do you bear it? Tholu asked quietly. Carrying all that loss, all that grief, by making it mean something. Every person we carry in our archives lived a life full of love and dreams and hope. As long as we remember them, as long as we keep their stories alive, They haven't really died. They've just moved to a different kind of existence. Captain Chen looked at the rows of stasis pods containing her crew. My people volunteered to sleep so that the dead could wake up. We put our own lives on hold to give vanished civilizations another chance to touch the future. And when will your mission end? Crixhan asked. When humanity no longer needs guardians. When the universe becomes safe enough that love doesn't need weapons to protect it. When death is no longer the final word in any story that deserves to continue. The captain smiled at them again. And this time, they could see the weight of 50 years in her eyes, the burden of carrying entire worlds in her heart. Until then, we keep flying. We keep watching. We keep the memories safe. And when the time comes, we'll plant these seeds of the past in the soil of the future, so that something beautiful can grow again. Captain Veltar sat across from Captain Sarah Chen in the Indomitable's briefing room. Between them lay the weight of 50 years and the gap between two completely different ways of understanding the universe. The human woman sipped tea from a simple cup while explaining concepts that shattered everything the Zephyrian thought he knew about war and civilization. You have to understand, Captain Chen said calmly. We never expected to win the war in any traditional sense. The Kraliks had superior numbers, better weapons, and a 1,000-year head start on space combat. From the beginning, we knew we were going to lose. Then why fight? Veltar asked. Why not surrender and negotiate for survival? Captain Chen set down her cup and looked directly at him. Her eyes were kind but absolutely unyielding. Because some things are more important than survival. Some things are worth dying for. And some things are so precious that you'll do anything, become anything, to keep them safe. She gestured to the walls around them, which displayed images of human colonies, families, children playing in parks under alien suns. We weren't fighting to win territory or resources. We were fighting to ensure that human civilization would continue, even if every human died in the process. That makes no sense, Veltar protested. How can a civilization continue without people? Through memory, through art, through the dreams we pass to others, through the love we leave behind. Captain Chen touched a control and the room filled with the sound of human music, complex harmonies that spoke of joy and loss and hope. This ship carries the souls of 17 worlds, not their people, but their essence, their songs, their stories, their children's laughter, their grandparents' wisdom. Crixhan leaned forward. But the technology, Captain. How did humans develop such advanced systems so quickly? Your people had barely mastered interstellar travel when the war began. Captain Chen smiled, and there was pride in that smile, but also terrible sadness. We developed it the same way humans have always developed technology, through necessity, desperation, and the absolute refusal to accept that something is impossible. She stood and walked to a display showing the ship's technical specifications. The paradox engine wasn't built by physicists who understood temporal mechanics. It was built by engineers who refused to accept that their children had to die from lack of power for the life support systems. They made it work through pure stubbornness. But the physics, Tholuk started to object. The physics said it couldn't work, Captain Chen agreed. So we found new physics. When your family is dying, and the laws of nature say you can't save them, you don't accept those laws. You break them and write new ones. She moved to another display showing the ship's organic computer system. The living computer network wasn't designed by experts in consciousness transfer. It was created by a mother whose daughter died in battle, but whose mind was still active in her ship's computer core when we found the wreckage. Instead of letting that consciousness fade away, we learned how to keep it alive, how to give it purpose, how to let love transcend death itself. Veltar's tentacles trembled as he tried to process this information. You're saying humans developed impossible technology through emotional need rather than scientific understanding. I'm saying humans developed impossible technology because we refused to let impossibility stop us from protecting what we loved. Every breakthrough came from someone who simply wouldn't accept that their loved ones had to die. Captain Chen returned to her seat and picked up her teacup again. The self-repairing armor was invented by a man whose ship was destroyed 3 times. but who kept rebuilding it because his crew's bodies were still inside and he refused to abandon them. The adaptive weapons were created by a woman whose planet was invaded by 7 different alien species, and she got tired of having to build new guns for each enemy. And the stasis systems? Crixhan asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Invented by doctors who couldn't bear to tell parents that their wounded children were going to die, so they found a way to pause death itself, to hold life in suspension until they could figure out how to fix what was broken. The room fell silent except for the soft background music, a lullaby sung by voices that had been gone for half a century, but somehow still echoed in the ship's corridors. Every system on this ship, Captain Chen continued, was built by someone who loved something more than they feared the impossible. The result is technology that shouldn't exist, but does anyway, because humans are too stubborn to let love be, defeated by logic. Veltar looked around the briefing room, seeing it with new eyes. The walls weren't just decorated with images, they were shrines. Every picture, every display, every memorial plaque was a promise to the dead that they would not be forgotten. How many ships like this do humans have? He asked quietly. All of them, Captain Chen replied. Every human vessel built during the war carries the same mission. We're not a military fleet. We're a traveling museum, a mobile library, a civilization, in exile. Each ship carries different pieces of who we were, ensuring that if some are lost, others will survive to remember. And after the war ended, the mission continued. The war was never about defeating the Kralix. It was about ensuring that something beautiful would survive the darkness. When the fighting stopped, we kept flying, because the universe is still dangerous and memory is still fragile. Tholux was studying the technical readouts on his scanner. Captain, these systems, they're not just advanced, they're evolving. The ship is becoming more sophisticated every day. Of course it is, Captain, Chen said as if this was obvious. The ship learns from every encounter, every conversation, every moment of existence. It carries the consciousness of thousands of beings who chose to remain after death. Their combined wisdom grows stronger with time. But why? Veltar asked. Why choose this existence? Why not simply die and rest? Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because someone has to remember. Someone has to carry the laughter of children who will never grow up. Someone has to preserve the love letters of couples who will never meet again. Someone has to make sure that all the beauty that was destroyed doesn't just vanish into nothing. She looked directly at Veltar, and he saw tears in her eyes, tears that she didn't try to hide or wipe away. We choose this existence because the alternative is letting entire worlds die twice, once in body and again in memory. We refuse to allow that second death. And how long will you continue? Until the heat death of the universe, if necessary. Until every star grows cold and every planet crumbles to dust. As long as consciousness exists anywhere, these memories will endure. Captain Chen stood and walked back to the viewing port. Outside, the stars shone with ancient light, and somewhere among them were the worlds that had sent their souls to this ship for safekeeping. We've become something new, she said softly. Not quite alive, not quite dead, but something in between. Something that exists to serve love itself, to be guardians of everything precious that might otherwise be lost. Veltar joined her at the viewing port. And if other species threatened by extinction came to you, we would carry their memories too. Love doesn't belong to any one species. Beauty doesn't recognize borders. If you have something precious that needs preserving, we'll find room for it among the stars. The Zephyrian captain realized he was looking at the future of consciousness itself, beings who had chosen to become eternal guardians of everything worth saving, sailing forever between the stars with holds full of dreams and hearts full of unending purpose. Captain Chen led the alien visitors to the deepest part of the Indomitable, down corridors that seemed to stretch forever, and through doorways that opened onto impossible spaces. The ship was bigger on the inside than on the outside, its interior, dimensions folded through higher mathematical concepts that made Tholix's engineering mind ache. This is the core, Captain Chen said as they entered a vast spherical chamber that shouldn't have been able to fit inside any ship. This is where we keep the most precious things. The walls curved away in all directions, covered with billions of small lights that pulsed like heartbeats. Each light was a memory, a life, a moment of love or joy or beauty that had been saved from oblivion. At the center of the sphere floated a structure that defied description, part crystal, part flesh, part pure energy, singing with voices that came from everywhere and nowhere. "What is it?" Crixhun whispered, afraid to speak too loudly in this sacred space. "It's us," Captain Chen replied simply. "Every consciousness that has ever chosen to join this mission. Every soul that refused to let death be the end of their story. They're all here thinking and dreaming together, keeping the memories of dead worlds alive through sheer force of will." Veltar stared at the impossible structure. "How many?" "Millions now. Every human who died in the war and chose to continue serving. Every alien who was killed with honor and accepted our invitation to remain. Every consciousness from every species that decided love was more important than individual survival." The singing grew louder, and suddenly the alien visitors could understand the voices. They were speaking in harmony, telling the stories of countless worlds, sharing the dreams of children who would never grow up, preserving the wisdom of cultures that had been wiped from existence. "We are the library of the lost," the voices sang. "We are the museum of what was beautiful. We are the promise that nothing precious ever truly dies." Captain Chen walked closer to the central structure, and it pulsed brighter at her approach. "This is what the Kralix never understood. This is what every enemy of humanity fails to grasp. We don't fight to preserve our bodies or our territories or our political systems. We fight to preserve something far more important, the capacity for love itself." She turned to face her alien guests, and now they could see that she was more than just human. There was something in her eyes that belonged to multiple species, multiple lifetimes of experience. She had become a focal point for all the consciousness. Within the ship, a living avatar of collective memory. "Do you want to know what makes this ship so advanced?" she asked. "Do you want to understand technology that violates the laws of physics? It's simple. We've weaponized love. We've turned memory itself into a tool of war and preservation." The chamber around them began to shift and change, showing images of the technologies they had discovered. But now the aliens could see the truth behind each impossible device. "The self-repairing armor doesn't just learn from damage," Captain Chen explained as they watched metal reshape itself after being struck. "It's guided by the consciousness of every engineer who ever died trying to build better protection for their friends. Their love makes the metal stronger." The scene changed to show the adaptive weapons in action. The smart ammunition doesn't just analyze targets. It's directed by the spirits of every parent who ever lost a child to violence. Their rage gives the weapons their precision. Another shift revealed the paradox engine spinning in its impossible dance through time. The power system doesn't just bend the laws of physics. It's powered by the refusal of loving souls to accept that death means the end of caring. Their determination breaks reality itself. "And the living computer system?" Tholu asked, though he was beginning to understand. "Every consciousness that joins us brings their knowledge, their skills, their unique way of seeing the universe. We don't just have artificial intelligence. We have eternal intelligence. The wisdom of the dead serving the needs of the living. Forever." The images faded, and they were back in the core with its billions of lights and its impossible central structure. Captain Chen walked over to one of the walls and pressed her hand against it. Immediately, thousands of the lights began to glow, brighter. "These are the memories of New Shanghai Colony," she said softly. 8 million people killed in a single day when the Kralix poisoned their sun. But they're not gone. Every person who lived there, every moment of joy they experienced, every act of love they performed, it's all here, preserved forever. She moved to another section of the wall. "These are the Vorthon refugees who joined us after their homeworld was destroyed. They brought their entire cultural database, their music, their poetry, their mathematical theorems that we still don't fully understand." Another section glowed as she touched it. "The Kralix soldiers who died with honor in battle and chose to stay with us rather than face judgment in their own afterlife. They help us understand our former enemies, teach us compassion for those who tried to destroy us." Veltar realized he was crying, though he hadn't noticed when the tears started. "You've built heaven," he whispered. "An actual, functioning afterlife." "We've built something better than heaven," Captain Chen replied. "We've built purpose that survives death, love that transcends the physical, hope that refuses to be extinguished by any darkness." The central structure pulsed again, and suddenly the alien visitors could feel it, the vast network of consciousness that made the ship possible. Millions of minds thinking in harmony, sharing their memories, their skills, their love for existence itself. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrible all at once. "This is what shouldn't exist," Captain Chen said, as the experience washed over them. "Not the technology, not the impossible physics. This, the idea that love can be stronger than death, that memory can become a weapon, that consciousness can choose its own fate." "How?" Crixon managed to ask through his tears. "By refusing to accept that anything good has to end, by choosing to serve something greater than ourselves, by deciding that the universe's tendency toward entropy and loss is not the final word in any story worth telling." The singing of the collective consciousness grew louder, and now it included voices speaking in Zephyrian, welcoming the visitors, inviting them to understand, and perhaps to join. "Every consciousness in this ship made the same choice," Captain Chen explained. "When faced with death, with the end of everything they cared about, they said no. They chose to continue caring, continue serving, continue loving, even if it meant giving up individual existence." "And this is what you offer to other species?" Veltar asked. "We offer what we've always offered, the chance for something beautiful to survive the darkness. If your people, your worlds, your civilizations face extinction, we'll carry them forward, not as conquerors or saviors, but as gardeners of memory, ensuring that nothing precious is ever truly lost." The chamber began to fade around them as Captain Chen led them back toward the upper levels of the ship. But the feeling remained, the sense of being part of something vast and loving and eternal. The universe is not a cold, empty place where consciousness is just a brief flicker before oblivion, Captain Chen said as they walked. "We've proven that love can reshape reality, memory can transcend death, will can overcome entropy itself. And that's what makes this ship impossible." Tholix asked. "No," Captain Chen replied with a smile that contained the warmth of millions of souls. "What makes this ship impossible is that it exists anyway, because humans are too stubborn to let impossibility stop them from protecting what they love." They reached the bridge where the memorial plaques lined the walls and the stars shone beyond the viewports. Captain Chen took her command chair, but now the aliens could see that she was never truly alone there. The ship itself was alive with loving consciousness, ready to serve, ready to remember, ready to carry the light of vanished worlds into whatever future awaited. "This is what humanity really is," she said quietly. "We're not the species that refuses to die. We're the species that refuses to let anything good die. And that, according to every law of physics and philosophy, should be impossible. But here we are anyway,"